Weddings are supposed to be joyful. They're supposed to be a celebration of love, not the destruction of it. And yet, there I was, standing in a hall filled with flowers, lights, and champagne flutes, watching my wife rise from her chair during our daughter's wedding reception and calmly announce to everyone that she was leaving me. Just like that. No warning. No hesitation. No regard for timing, for our daughter's happiness, or for the 100+ guests who fell silent the moment those words left her mouth. "I just can't do this anymore," she said, loud and clear, right into the microphone meant for toasts and blessings. I didn't move. Not at first. I just looked at her, my wife of 27 years, like I was seeing her for the very first time. Her posture was perfect, her makeup still flawless, her voice steady like she had rehearsed it. Maybe she had. The crowd around us didn't know how to respond. Some gasped. Some glanced at me. Others looked down, pretending not to hear what they just heard. My daughter, Emma, sat frozen in her white gown, confusion washing across her face like a wave she never saw coming. And my wife? She stood proud, smug even, like she thought she'd stolen the show. But I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I didn't ask her why she chose this moment. Because the truth was, I already knew. Not the specifics. But I'd seen the distance growing. The late-night texts she tilted her screen to hide. The lingering scent of a cologne that wasn't mine when she walked through the door. The work events that always fell on weekends. I'd known something was unraveling beneath the surface. I just didn't expect her to unravel it in front of our family, our friends, and most heartbreakingly, our daughter. But that's what cowards do. They strike where the damage runs deepest. As the room sat in stunned silence, she took a seat again like nothing had happened. Her wine glass trembled slightly in her hand, but her eyes were dry. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. I saw it all in her posture. This was her moment. Her declaration. Her way of rewriting the story so that she could be the narrator of her own liberation. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had come prepared. Not for this exact moment, no, but for the truth. And when truth is on your side, you never need to raise your voice. I stood slowly, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked toward the front of the room where the DJ had just finished adjusting the mic settings. I nodded to him, took the mic in my hand. The sound of my own breath filled my ears, but my face stayed calm. "Thank you all for being here," I said. My voice didn't crack. It didn't falter. I know that tonight is meant to be about love. And it still is. Because love, real love, is about truth. And before we move forward with the evening, there's a little truth I'd like to share. The guests shifted in their seats. My daughter, still stunned, leaned forward slightly. My wife, now pale, finally turned to look at me. Her fingers clutched the tablecloth like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the room. And I saw it in her eyes then, that flicker of fear. The kind that only comes when you realize the person you underestimated was never blind. Just patient. I gave her the stage because I wanted the whole room to see the difference between loud betrayal and quiet clarity. She had made her move. Now it was my turn. But I didn't say more. Not yet. I simply smiled faintly, nodded again to the DJ, and reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, where something important waited. Something she wasn't ready for. The crowd watched as I pulled it out, neatly folded, and slid it into my hand. I didn't hold it up. I didn't need to. Because what came next would speak louder than anything I could say. I held the envelope in my hand like it was a glass of water in the middle of a wildfire. Everything around me burned. My wife's audacity, the silence of our guests, the confusion in our daughter's eyes. But I didn't feel the heat. I had felt it for months already. The long, creeping burn of betrayal doesn't come all at once. It simmers. It starts with missing glances, late returns, passwords changed without explanation. It starts with pretending not to notice when your partner starts treating strangers with more tenderness than they offer you at home. I had noticed it all. Every distance she created, every excuse she gave. At first, I tried to fix it, like most people do. I made her favorite dinners, asked her to talk, bought tickets to a weekend getaway she brushed off. She said I was being clingy, needy. "We're just in a rough patch," she'd whisper as she turned away in bed, her phone lighting up behind her back. But I knew better. I stopped asking for affection and started paying attention. Not to catch her. No, not for revenge. I just needed clarity. A man who has been married for nearly 3 decades knows the difference between love that's tired and love that's gone. The quiet betrayal built itself like a second home in my mind. And somewhere along the way, I decided I wasn't going to live in it. That's when I reached out to an old colleague of mine, a private investigator I once helped during a messy business divorce. I didn't ask for dirt. I asked for truth. Follow her. Just for a few weeks. I need to know if I'm losing my mind or just finally waking up. What he sent back to me a few weeks later confirmed what I already knew. But the difference was, now I had proof. Printed, timestamped, signed. Affair. With a man nearly 15 years younger than her. Not just any man, my best friend's son. A man who had grown up in our home. Who I had mentored. Who I had trusted around my family. I couldn't decide what broke me more, the betrayal, the disrespect, or the familiarity of it all. They had been seen together in hotels, restaurants, places two people go when they think the world is too distracted to notice. She looked happy in the photos, relaxed, like a woman who had already rehearsed her exit from the life we built together. But here's the thing about quiet men. We don't confront chaos with chaos. We wait. We watch. We pick our moment, not to humiliate, but to correct the lie. And tonight, at our daughter's wedding, when she stood and shattered our marriage like glass in front of everyone, she gave me my moment without even realizing it. She thought I'd collapse. She thought I'd be too stunned to respond. But I had walked into that ballroom with truth folded neatly in my jacket. Because I knew her. I knew this version of her, the one that always needs a performance, a spotlight, an audience. So I stood there on stage, the envelope still in my hand, and looked out at the room. Before we go any further, I said, I'd like to invite my wife to come up here. Her face changed. Not just pale, tight. Cold. Like a mask cracking. She didn't move. Please, I said again, gently. I think it's only fair that if we're sharing life updates today, we both get a turn. People murmured. A few looked horrified. My daughter stood up then, reaching toward me, but I nodded at her. It's okay, sweetheart. Just give me a moment. She sat down again, hands trembling in her lap. My wife finally stood, reluctantly. She walked slowly toward the stage like she was approaching a firing squad, and in a way, she was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I simply handed her the envelope. Before you make any more announcements tonight, I said, I think you should read this. She opened it, and when her eyes hit the first page, her entire body stiffened. Her hands trembled. And then, she started screaming. I stood beside her on that stage, but in truth, we were miles apart. She clutched the envelope with both hands like it was burning her from the inside out. The silence in the room became a living thing, dense, charged, unblinking. Everyone watched her, but no one moved. Her eyes darted from the photographs to the printed messages, each line confirming what I already knew. She wasn't just walking away from our marriage, she had already replaced it. Not with a stranger. Not with someone she met through chance, but with the one person who had once called me uncle as a boy. Her scream wasn't the kind that comes from guilt. It came from panic. From losing control of a story she thought she owned. You planned this, she hissed, voice cracking, hand shaking as she jabbed a finger toward me. You're trying to humiliate me. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was correcting the lie. The lie she chose to spill on a day that belonged to our daughter. I had remained silent for weeks, gathering truth like stitches in a wound. But when she tore open the narrative with her bold little declaration, she gave me permission to show everyone what I'd been carrying quietly. Gasps rippled through the room as a few of the guests finally began to whisper to each other. Some shook their heads. Others looked at her with disbelief. I saw one of my wife's cousins bury her face in her hands. The groom's father leaned over to whisper something in his wife's ear. But I kept my eyes on Emma, our daughter, still seated in her bridal gown, trembling. She looked from her mother to me, as if trying to figure out what part of her life was real anymore. And I hated that. Hated that the choices her mother made had forced the storm to break on her happiest day. I didn't want this, I said gently, addressing the room. I had every intention of letting today be about Emma and Noah. But since my wife chose to use this occasion to make a statement, I figured it was only fair the truth get its moment too. My voice didn't shake. My heart didn't pound. I wasn't angry anymore. That part had passed long before this day. Now I just felt released. Like everything I'd carried in silence had finally been laid down for good. I turned back to my wife. I wasn't going to say a word. But you chose to speak first. Her face crumpled, not with sadness, but fury. Her lip curled as she spat. You think this makes you look strong? Like some noble man who took the high road? I didn't respond to that either. The more she spoke, the more she exposed the very person she tried to hide. This wasn't about strength or revenge. This was about accountability. She wanted the audience. She had it now. But they weren't clapping. No one was clapping. She stormed off the stage, envelope still in hand, shoving past a stunned waiter as she made for the exit. I watched her go without following. For 27 years, I had chased after her emotions, her moods, her needs, always the first to apologize, to patch, to make peace. But not anymore. I looked out at the guests and took one long breath. I'm sorry you all had to witness that. But the good news is, there's still love in this room. Real love. And it belongs to the bride and groom. That's when I turned to Emma. Her eyes were glassy, but she stood up and walked toward me. I met her halfway, unsure of what she'd say. But she reached out, took my hand, and whispered, "Thank you for not letting her turn this into something ugly. You didn't ruin anything." She did. I squeezed her hand. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long while, I knew my silence had done something loud. After she stormed out, I stayed on that stage for another few seconds, the microphone still in my hand, though I no longer needed it. The envelope had done the talking for me. I glanced down at the papers she had dropped in her panic, photos face up, digital messages highlighted, printouts of hotel receipts, and one final page I'd signed at the bottom, an affidavit confirming the details. Not for drama, but for record. Because I didn't want my daughter or anyone else in that room to ever question whether I'd made this up out of bitterness. Truth, laid bare, leaves no room for speculation. I stepped down from the stage slowly, folded the papers neatly, and handed them to a friend near the front row. "Hold these for me," I said. "I think I've had enough of all this." He nodded, stunned but silent. I crossed the room toward Emma, who stood still in her wedding gown, hands clasped, eyes red-rimmed but dry. I expected her to fall apart, but she surprised me. Just as she always had. She took a breath, straightened her posture, and said, "Let's cut the cake, Dad. She's not going to take this day from me." That's when I knew I'd done the right thing. We gathered ourselves, Emma, the groom, the guests who had chosen grace over gossip, and moved forward. Slowly, tentatively, but forward all the same. The reception resumed, not quite as joyous, not quite as carefree, but still meaningful. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the wake of everything that had collapsed, real was more than enough. I danced once with my daughter, holding her carefully, like when she was young, and stood on my shoes just to reach my height. That memory held me together. That moment redeemed the night. Meanwhile, I knew she wouldn't go quietly. My wife, ex-wife, in spirit if not yet on paper. The moment she walked out of that reception hall, I knew the calls would come. The apologies wrapped in blame. The twisted justifications. The shame masked as anger. And I was right. The next morning, before I even finished my coffee, my phone lit up with a string of texts. The first was long and furious. "You humiliated me. You couldn't just be the bigger person? You planned this. You ruined our daughter's wedding. Then, we could have done this privately. But no, you had to make a scene. A scene." That's what she called her public announcement, her divorce mic drop at our daughter's wedding. A scene, not a betrayal. Not a mockery of 27 years. Just an unfortunate reaction to me not staying silent. I didn't respond. I wouldn't give her the stage again. She had already used enough of my life to feed her performance. From this moment forward, she could talk to herself if she wanted drama. I had reclaimed my voice, and I wasn't giving it back. Later that week, I dropped off the original copies of the documents with my attorney. "Are you filing immediately?" he asked. I nodded. She filed her intent at a wedding. Mine will be on paper. He didn't ask for more details. He didn't need to. I had built the case quietly, methodically, without fire, but with precision. I wasn't out to destroy her. I was out to free myself. And I had done just that. In front of everyone. Without raising my voice. Without throwing a single insult. Just facts, printed in black ink, handed across a room of stunned witnesses. There's a strange peace that comes after the storm. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it's finally over. And in the stillness, I realized something else. She had chosen to walk away that night thinking she had control of the narrative. But all I did was show the truth. And when truth walks into a room, shame follows the one trying hardest to run from it. After the wedding, silence spread faster than gossip. The guests didn't call. They didn't text. No one sent messages asking what happened, because everyone had seen it unfold with their own eyes. I didn't need to explain myself, and I didn't want to. I spent the following days in quiet reflection, back home in a house that had suddenly begun to breathe again. She hadn't returned, not even to collect her things. And I didn't reach out. There were no arguments left to have, no replays to run. The moment had passed, and it had spoken louder than either of us ever could. Emma called me the next evening. She said she and Noah had canceled their honeymoon for now. Too much energy to pretend we're okay, she admitted, her voice raw. But I wanted to say thank you. I didn't understand. For what? I asked. She took a breath. For not yelling. For not turning it into chaos. You didn't stoop to her level. You let the truth speak, and that meant everything to me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. My daughter had watched her father, heartbroken and ambushed, choose dignity over destruction, and it mattered. But the fallout didn't end there. My wife's, or rather, soon-to-be ex-wife's reputation took a hit. The man she had been seeing, that poor fool, disappeared as quickly as he had entered the picture. Word got around to his father, my former best friend. He called me 2 days later, barely able to speak through the shame. I had no idea, he said. My son, my family, were not built for this kind of disgrace. I told him plainly, neither was mine. We left it there. There was nothing else to say. Betrayal, when it comes from two directions, doesn't require explanation. Just space. I began packing up her belongings. Not angrily. Not even methodically. Just quietly. I placed her jewelry, her clothes, the framed photos she hadn't cared about in years, all into boxes. I called a courier and had them delivered to the address she had briefly stayed at during one of her weekend retreats. I left no note, no message. She would know who they were from. She would know what it meant. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I was giving her what she claimed she wanted, a clean break. But this time on my terms. Emma came by a few days later. She walked through the house, touched the walls like they were familiar but foreign. It feels different now, she said. Like it's finally yours. I smiled faintly and said, that's because it is. She hesitated before asking, do you think she ever loved you? That question landed harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I think she did. Once. But people change. And sometimes, love expires quietly. Emma nodded. She understood more than most daughters her age would. She had seen too much too soon, but she had also seen me stand my ground. Later that evening, my ex-wife texted me again. This time, just 2 words. I'm sorry. I read it. I didn't respond. Because sorry, now, didn't mean anything. Not after the silence. Not after the show. Not after she chose spectacle over substance. You don't apologize for blowing up a home and then ask to walk back through the rubble. At some point, sorry is just a word people use to escape the consequences of their choices. And I had learned the hard way. Some people only see your value when your silence costs them their comfort. Weeks passed, and the house grew quieter. But it wasn't the hollow kind of quiet that creeps in after someone leaves. No, this quiet had peace in it. It had intention. It had air. I slept better. I ate slower. I even started reading again, something I hadn't done in years. The home no longer felt like a shared stage where I played the fool. It felt like mine. The photos on the shelves were now just of Emma and family friends. I removed the ones of my wife, not in anger, but in release. A private ceremony, quiet and complete. People in our circle didn't need much from me after what happened. The story had traveled on its own. The ones who mattered respected my silence. The ones who didn't faded out. I didn't mind. After decades of pouring into a relationship that gave less and less back, I found I had no patience left for half-hearted conversations. Emma visited often. We spoke of her future, her plans, and her quiet strength that bloomed even after such a chaotic wedding day. She still hadn't spoken to her mother. Not because I asked her not to, but because some wounds make you walk away on your own. As for my wife, her attempts to reach out dwindled. A second, "I'm sorry," came a few days later, followed by a long message about how everything had just happened too fast. She wanted a chance to talk. Not to get back together, she clarified, but just to clear the air. I never replied, because the air was already clear. I had breathed in every lie, every half-truth, every excuse. And now, I was finally breathing on my own, no longer choking on the guilt she had carefully disguised as love for years. The divorce went through quietly. My lawyer told me it was one of the cleanest filings he'd seen after a public blow-up like that. She didn't contest a thing, he said. I wasn't surprised. Her moment in the spotlight had passed. The applause she expected never came. In fact, she was the one who became the story people whispered about, but not with sympathy, with disbelief. Because there's something deeply unsettling about someone who chooses destruction as a form of escape. And now, she had to live in the silence she tried to push onto me. One afternoon, while reorganizing my desk, I found the envelope again, the original one. Still sealed, as if untouched by all the noise it had created. I held it for a long moment. Then, without ceremony, I fed it through the shredder. Not out of rage. Out of finality. I didn't need the proof anymore. The truth had done its job. It had freed me. I no longer needed reminders of what she did. I had already built something better, a life that didn't include her. A few weeks later, Emma and Noah stopped by with some news. They had rebooked their honeymoon. They were ready to move on. "And we wanted to thank you," Emma said. "Not just for what you did that night, but for not letting it become who you are." That meant more than anything, because she saw it. She saw how I could have turned bitter, could have lashed out, could have made the moment about revenge. But instead, I let the truth do what it does best, stand. And that's what I had done. I gave her the stage. And when she used it to betray me, I took it back. Some betrayals don't need revenge. They just need the truth, spoken calmly and clearly. If this story reminded you of your own strength, or what it means to rise with dignity, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to know that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it's the loudest justice of all.